back to the U-boat workshop, and as you can see we've changed venues to a little bit cleaner and more airy position, so we can show you what the paintwork looks like. And as you can see we've given it a little bit of paint, and jolly nice she looks too, almost as if you've just come out of the workshop in Kiel. However, that's not how we want it to look when she's on the water. So some of you might think, yeah, that looks absolutely fantastic, I want it like that. I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to mess it up a bit. So as you can see, I've actually painted this with acrylic paints, matte acrylic, and then I flat coated it after that to seal it all. So she's now ready to do a bit of weathering on it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut the film and do different stages of weathering. I'm not going to bore you with the techniques of doing the weathering, because you can view that on YouTube and there's plenty of really professional guys that will show you hand in hand how to do it. But initially the first stage will be to put on some good old looks all over the top and bottom holes, and then we're going to dull the paint down with possibly some of this salt streaking material, a little bit of that. You can use a little bit of white paint if you like, and then we'll brush that off, and it'll give it a little bit of a lighter cut, quite subtle. We'll do that first, and then the second time we'll reapply all the salt particles here over different stages, and then we're going to apply some good old grime to it, and that will give it a bit more of a mottled finish all over, and we'll sort of get in all the cracks and various pieces, you know, all little bits and fittings and various things like that. So that'll be the next stage, and then finally, when we've done that, we'll come back and do some touch-ups on some of the metal parts and bits and pieces with the rust streaks, and we'll do that by adding that to a little bit of white spirit, and then we can run those into all these little grooves around the handrails and that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to do. We'll just kind of break the film, because otherwise it's going to be you don't want to hear me waffling on for hours and hours about it. I'll just show you the results of each stage, and then once it's finished, then we can get on with the really great part, and that will be getting it in the water, which I'm sure what you're all looking forward to. So we'll just break the film and show you what the next stage is once I've dulled off all this paintwork. So. Well, hello there, back to see the results of the first stage of the weathering. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it indoors this time, because the using the salt and the spray was a bit too much, really. I don't think my wife was going to put up with that. So we're back in the workshop just to show you what the results are of the first stage. And I said beforehand, what I've done is I've completely wetted the boat out, and then used the salt on that, and I'm going to show you this time. I wasn't going to show you this, but I'll show you this on the next what I'm going to have to do on the next part of the weathering. But this first stage is what I've done is I've just applied this very fine sort of coat of salt streaking material, which is this, mixed with a bit of white spirit in my airbrush container, and then sprayed that over the salt particles. Now that's giving it a subtle coat. Now, just to give you some idea of how I approach the weathering techniques on boats like this is, first of all, you produce the boat just as it would do if it just left the the workshop or the shipyard, and then you think about the process of weathering as it goes on. And then the first stage of that is it goes to sea, and it gets covered in salt water, and therefore you get, the paint becomes a little bit duller. You get a few salt markings on the paintwork. Then the next stage is the grime that's attached to it through the seawater and through the dockyards and everything else like that, and that gets in all to the various bits and pieces, all the fittings and everything else like that, and obviously a few scratch marks and things like that if you want to put them on there. And then the third stage is the rust, where it's where it's attached to itself to where it's corroding on the various joints, and you know, and also some salt streaking on the various fittings that are sticking out, and that's the way that I approach it. Now, after I've done that weathering, I don't need to flat coat it or anything like that, because the stuff I'm using actually is enamel eventually, and that deposits itself, you know, on the paintwork. So that's the main stage. So I'm just going to show you a close-up of, try to give you a close-up of what it's done to the paintwork. Right, here we are, and I'm not sure whether you can see, so I zoom it in, you can see maybe the little spots of salts and that have accumulated on the conning tower there. Not much, but kind of very, very subtle. And also on the hull, you can see some changes in colour where it's just discoloured some of the grey paintwork. You know, it's quite random, and that's, you know, see some spots over it there. You can see that like that, and that's what we're kind of looking for. Right. Okay. So for the next stage, I've got my salt grinder, which you can get out your larder and basically fill it up with rock salt, and then it can sort of, you can then grind it over the surface, and I'll show you that in a minute. All you need is some water like that, and you can do it either with a brush or with your airbrush. So initially I'll just show you sort of how it is, whether you can see this. Put that down on there. So what I'm going to do is basically, I'm just going to cover it with a bit of water, get it all nice and wet like that. That's all you need to do. I mean, this is a you know, a well-known technique. You know, it is one of the methods that I use. It's not I don't always use these methods. There are other methods that I do use to rust things, and some of those are quite a secret techniques, but this is a well-known technique, and it does work very well if you're quite subtle. Right, you've wetted it out. Take your grinder, and away you go. And that's all you need to do. And there you go. You can see the little salt crystals have attached themselves to the hull, and all you have to do now is wait until that dries. Right, so in the meantime, while you're waiting for that to dry, and you could use a hairdryer, but I wouldn't suggest you do that because it can heat up the boat, so I tend to leave it to dry in the house or something like that for a couple of hours until it's dried off, until there's no more water and the salt crystals have sort of stuck to the boat. But in the meantime, then what you can do is you can get your airbrush, and I suggest one of these because it holds quite a bit, and then you get some streaking grime or some grey wash, depending on whichever one you want. You don't need very much. I don't know how much there is in here. Not a lot by the looks of it. A bit in there. Oh yes, there is. There's quite a bit in there, as you can see. That there's quite a bit in there. Quite a bit in there, yeah. And anyway, we put that in there. Nice bit of grime like that. And then basically we add some white spirit to this. A little bit of ice like that. And then you can shake it up. And what that does is as you can see that, it puts that into suspension now, just like the real thing. And we're going to spray that, once that's dry, we're going to spray that all over it. And then when that's dry, all we've got to do then is come back and brush it off with a stiff brush or a toothbrush. And the thing is, you've got to be a bit careful with that. Obviously you'll knock your fittings off, but you know, it can get stuck in there quite a bit, so don't wash it off with water, but just brush it off. And also that brushing off also roughens the paintwork up as well. So we'll do this, and then we'll come back and we'll show you what the results are. Right, yeah, we finished the grime part of it now. That was quick, wasn't it? And I'm just going to show you the effects of what that's done, and it's given it quite quite an odd mottled finish, mostly on the upper superstructure, because that's where most of the grime would be. The rest of this hull would be kind of like salt streaks and some rust, but I'll just give you a close-up view of what it is. Some odd sort of mottling there on the deck, and you can see that it's not over the top. You can see the conning towers looking rather sort of speckly top, sort of odd bits of grime and everything else deposited on there, you can see, and it started to collect in all the various bits of the fitting, and especially like round the anchor, as you can see that, and a little bit round there. But yeah, it's looking kind of, it's not too overboard or anything like that at the present moment. You can see some grime there on the in the conning tower, plenty in there, as you can see in there. You can see there, and then as you go back, you can see further bits of spots of mottling. And right, so now the last part of the weathering is to now highlight all the various bits of rust and doors and everything else, and do some salt streaking and everything else, and that's done basically by hand. So what I'll be doing with that is using possibly some of this rust streaking material mixed with a little bit of white spirit, not too much, and then we can put it in the cracks, and hopefully that'll sort of run around all the various cracks and bits and pieces like that. And you let it dry, and then you come back with some more white spirit, and then you wash it out, and gradually you build up, you know, obviously some rust marks and stuff like that. I mean, obviously the more you apply, the more rusty it becomes, but I won't go completely overboard on this. It'll just be a nice kind of used U-boat, and then I'm going to finish off with some salt streaks which will come off of various of the fittings that would streak down, not obviously on the lower hull, because, you know, I mean, obviously they'd be washed off, but you know, bits and pieces like here where the salt has washed off the fittings and everything else and gone down the side. So that's what I'll be doing in the final piece. Also, I'm going to have to make the battery up for this, and this is some clear shrink tubing, which is about 4:1 reduction, with some adhesive on the inside, which is good. You can get this off of eBay or something like that. It's not entirely cheap, but it does a fantastic job. This is the battery, and what we're going to do is we're going to push that battery in there, cut its shape, and then we're going to shrink it around the battery, and then we're going to seal it with some of this stuff. It's like gold label pond sealer, and I find it works absolutely brilliantly, and that then can be put into all the what's left of the open cracks and everything else, like, and around the leads. And obviously we've got to change the lead as well, like that. And the benefit of that is that you can actually see through the clear here if there's any condensation appearing, and then, you know, obviously then the you know, the shrink wrap's been compromised or the sealant's been compromised, and it does happen because you're taking it in and out all the time. And all you got to do is peel it off before it gets too bad, dry the battery out, and then reapply some of the sealant around there. And of course it does, but at least you can actually see then whether the battery's actually, you know, there's any water getting in there, and of course it does happen over time. So that's what we're going to be doing in the final bits, and then we should be able to put it all together. We got to obviously put some the radio wires on here, and we're finished. I've got all that ready to go on there. Now I'm going to use some stretchy cord for that, which is the best thing, because then it don't get caught up and done with your fittings off, which is kind of good. And hopefully when you come back, I'll have it all completed, and then we'll be ready to do some testing in the tank. So see you then.